Hello and welcome back to another video. So I've used the PS5 for almost a year now actually, and it's a very solid console. However, it does feel like the PS5 is overhyped a bit, and I won't be directly comparing it to the Xbox Series X here, but you'll hear some comparisons here and there because the Series X is obviously its biggest competitor. Love it or hate it, the PS5 went for a big redesign this generation. I don't personally mind the design, but it is a little bit polarizing. But what I do take note of is that the size of the PS5 is absolutely huge. It doesn't fit in as many places as some of the other consoles you've used in the past. But for me, it's not a deal breaker by any means. Where Sony really innovated this generation has to be the Dualsense Controller. The haptic feedback and adaptive triggers are just really cool. In more competitive multiplayer games, I found myself turning these features off just because I liked using the controller as I've been using it in the past, and I feel like it interrupts me a little bit less. With that said, in more story mode games, I really found to appreciate the haptic feedback and adaptive triggers in particular. Quick note though is the little mic in the controller was kind of fun to use for multiplayer games to talk to some people when you're not using a headset. And then we also have to, of course, talk about the drift issue that many people have dealt with, and I still to this day have not personally had an issue, knock on wood, but that and other controllers, people have experienced this, and it's something that you may need to get fixed or may need to get a new controller. Either way, I do like what Sony did this year with the DualSense controller, with all the new features, and I like the increased size of it in comparison to the last generation's model. Another thing that some had an issue with the PS5 was the amount of storage. There is 667 gigabytes of usable storage, and if you're getting games like COD, which takes up a lot, you can find yourself running short on storage. Importantly, PS5's Kraken compressor really helps alleviate the issue by allowing games to take up less space than they would if they didn't have the compressor, and that they do on other consoles like Series X. And we did finally get expandable storage support, with drives that will allow you to play PS4 games on external drives, and then the ability to expand your storage using the M.2 slot finally. It does need to be over 250 gigabytes of storage. It needs to be a PCIe Gen 4 drive. I believe 5500 megabytes per second is around what you want to look for. But either way, I am very happy to see that expandable storage is now very much a thing on PS5. And speaking of speed, the drive speed is so fast, faster than anything I've used on a console. Games and scenes load so quickly, and I think that's one of the biggest jumps you'll see from the previous generation consoles. Sony worked hard on making the PS5 feel next gen, and the UI is reminiscent of this goal. I won't say too much about it, but I like the elegant design and the intuitive use of it, and I think it's going to be really nice for most people to use and get used to, even if there are some changes from PS4's user interface. Now, some people believe that PlayStation's biggest strength is in their games. Sony has a lot of high quality studios making exclusives for them. It is interesting that some of those exclusives are coming to Xbox and Windows, more Windows in particular. But either way, you get some really nice exclusives with games like Spider-Man, God of War, Demon's Souls, Ratchet & Clank, and other notable ones. In general, the PlayStation has some awesome single-player games that are exclusive to their consoles. For me, I spend more of my time playing multiplayer games because you play the modes over and over again, whereas with single player games I tend to play it through one time, and that's why it doesn't matter to me as much about exclusives, especially as we're starting to see them on other platforms. But it is a big advantage for Sony if you are interested in their games. I also wish they worked on PS Now, because Xbox Game Pass in comparison brings a lot more value, and I think that Sony could really benefit from improving it. The most important upgrade from the last generation has to be in the performance. We are now so much closer to that high-end gaming experience that you only found on PC before. The PS5 can do 4K 120 FPS. With that said, in most AAA games you won't be seeing 4K 120 FPS, especially in games that are more intensive and the ones that tend to be a little more popular. But 4K 60 is still a very nice target for many of the games, especially in those slower story mode games that look quite nice, and it's leaps and bounds ahead of what we got on PS4. Worth noting is it was found that the dies on the PS5 were not full RDNA 2, so we may be missing out on some of the graphical features promised with the architecture. However, AMD still markets it as RDNA 2, so I think that for the most part we will be seeing a lot of the features supported, but we may not get the promised performance that also comes with it. The PS5 really does perform quite well. In the long run, it may fall behind the stronger Xbox Series X, but that probably won't be for every game in particular, because the devs that optimize for the PS5 will be able to get it pretty close to each other and maybe better in some circumstances. The PS5 will sell more units, obviously, and thus it gives more incentives to make the version a little bit better. I don't see the current performance gap being a huge handicap for PS5 in comparison to Xbox Series X, but it's still something that you should take into account. Alright, let's get into the final verdict. So if you're coming from a PS4 and you're invested into Sony's ecosystem, the PS5 makes a lot of sense. You can play your PS4 games using backwards compatibility, and you can use your DualShock controllers for playing PS4 games. Even Xbox One users will likely find the PS5 very enjoyable. It truly is a next-gen upgrade. However, there is fierce competition from Series X this generation, unlike Xbox One to PS4, and I think a lot of people are going to consider Series X this time around. In a sense, the PS5 has been overhyped because of the success of the PS4, but it still is a great console and a nice upgrade. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and peace.